for coming. Thank Tom Facey and Carol Williams. Both are here tonight and have been great supporters of the gay and lesbian community. And so thanks. First of all, thank you for being here, and thank you for your continuing support. I'm going to introduce our speakers, and our agenda for tonight is to have three short-lived speakers. Their speeches will be short-lived. And then we're going to get into groups and talk about some issues. And there's a handout going around right now about those focus groups. And more about that in a minute, but let me just kind of introduce things now. I don't know if you can hear me or not back there. I'm assuming you can. Okay, in a Rolling Stone article entitled "The Holy War Against Gays," Robert Dreyfuss, this is a 1999 article, tells the story of a meeting on January 1996 among 20 leaders of the Christian right wing, who in the basement of a Baptist church in Memphis launched what they called an anti-homosexual network. Representatives from Dobson's Focus on the Family in Colorado Springs, where our president paid a visit this summer, Robertson's Christian Coalition, and others, where they are hammering out a platform that links same-sex relations to a breakdown of American family values and advocates, among other things, the removal of all rights for lesbians and gays, the promotion of conversion of queers to Christians, and for some, like Dr. Paul Cameron, the extermination of gays with AIDS. Their political backers, including the current president, Trent Lott and Rick Santorum, who called gays the equivalent of alcoholics and rapists, have capitalized on the animus toward the queer community by using the 41% of Americans who claim to be born again to link their agenda for a Christian republic to a new patriotic imperialism, a wholesale undermining of environmental protections, and a privatization of health care and Social Security. This, then, is the anti-gay agenda. That's our title. And the 2004 election has, by most accounts, empowered that movement with its success, causing scared Democrats like the governor-elect to distance themselves from the party platform that supports the civil rights of gays and lesbians. The political power of this agenda arises from a culture of religious conviction that currently threatens the humanist principles of our government, and progressive politics now must choose between abandoning those principles or, like John Locke with his slaves, carving out an exception for those principles when it comes to sexual orientation. How can we resist this fundamentalist agenda? Our speakers and you tonight will address that very question. Resistance, though tied to the forces of the power it opposes, can nevertheless change the configuration of power by understanding first that power does not reside solely in the appetite of Karl Rove or a Memphis basement, and secondly, that personal, cultural, and social action can make a difference. We are asking you tonight to explore ways of resisting this diffuse and multifaceted agenda, which arose, after all, in reaction to the inroads we are currently making in the world of domestic partnership law and cultural acceptance. The Inspiration Network is only a surf away from Queer as Folk. Kirk and Madsen in After the Ball have outlined strategies of desensitization, jamming, and conversion as ways of exposing the fanaticism of the new theocrats and the sweetness and light of Steve and Adam. But there are other routes besides those of Madison Avenue homocons, like these writers of this book, to underscore the fundamental unfairness, injustice, and in many cases violence that the LGBTI community faces in Missoula, in Helena, in Washington, and even in the countries many of us would like to take a very long, strange trip to, preferably tomorrow morning. The election highlighted the discrimination we face. Now we must find ways to overcome it. If you don't like the news, one disc jockey used to say, go out and make some of your own. Our anti-gay agenda includes, we have tonight postcards, which I think Ken's going to be passing out. And now the print on the back of these postcards is minuscule, so you might want to sign the postcards separately at the bottom of the print. But if you sign your postcard and give your address, we will send it for you. And we have postcards to the governor-elect and then postcards to our senators, Baucus, or Conrad Burns, stating you don't want to support the federal constitutional amendment. And the other one is about 3 or 4 bills that are coming before the Montana legislature this session, that you support hate crimes legislation. And I know that's a controversial one. You can cross it out if you don't. That you support civil unions, the amendment to the Human Rights Act, which will include sexual orientation, and then a safe school initiative. So if we're willing, if you want to put your little card in the box, we are going to somehow stamp it and send it for you, okay? Okay, we will, there's also a beautiful drawing on the other side of Queer Montana by David Wilson. Okay, so we have a mailing list sign-up sheet going around as well. If you would like to get the minutes of this meeting, which we'll collate and send to you. So that should be coming around for you tonight. We'll have 3 speakers, followed by a question and answer, followed by certain focus groups that people want to get into. And that handout on there has the proposed focus groups. By that time, our fearless leader, Shiv Ganesh, should be here to organize our behavior. Then we will get, after we meet for a while, some reports back from you about suggestions. There is also a donation box up front, and the outfield that gets no money from the university. So we're kind of like a very loose coalition, as it were. What else? We have Joel Baird's MCAT is filming us tonight. So he's not going to film the question askers, but just the people that are up here. And if there are any people that are, camera shy, then you maybe, I don't know, like go in the back row or whatever. But you're all going to be being on MCAT is not exactly, well, the movies. Okay, so our own little things. Okay, so he's here, and we thank Joel for making that possible. Okay, so our first speaker is Katie Kane, who I think drifted in. There she is. And she's a professor of English at the University of Montana, assistant professor specializing in post-colonial and cultural studies. Her manuscript from Hell to Pine Ridge is currently under consideration in a number of presses. Our second speaker will be Chris Peterson, former president of ASUM and a campaign worker for the Kerry campaign. And our last speaker is Nancy Siegel, one of the courageous plaintiffs in Snetzinger versus the Board of Regents, a case currently pending before the Montana Supreme Court that challenges the university's refusal to allow qualified same-sex partners to pay into the health plan. She lives with her partner, Carol Snetzinger, and her daughter, Zoe, in Missoula. Okay, so let's listen to our speakers, and we'll go from there. And thanks for coming. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm probably not going to talk for very long tonight. I've got a number of ideas that I'll probably pass by you. I've been doing some research with groups that use feelings and emotion in order to create resistance. And I'm just going to start out this evening by telling you how I feel as a citizen with the desire for social justice in this ship of fools that is the early 21st century Bush-dominated moral choices America. I'm depressed. I'm apathetic. I'm ashamed to be an American. I'm incredulous. I'm in mourning for the promise America, at least at one time, claimed to offer its citizens: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I have these emotions, and I have a number of other ones, as I'm sure do you. And what I want to kind of bring to your attention tonight is work, not that I have done myself, but work that a number of activists, artists, and scholars out there are doing on the relationship between resistance and emotions. And what I'm just going to do is pass around a book. I definitely want to get this back, so if somebody could make sure that I get it. It's by Anne Svetkovich, and I'll be working just a little bit with some of the stuff she does. It's called An Archive of Feelings, Trauma, Sexuality, and Lesbian Cultures. And she has an argument, among a number of other things, that trauma and emotion can be used to to build public cultures. I have another thing that she gave to me from this Chicago Field Tank Manifesto, and I didn't bring anywhere near enough, but I'll sort of read out to you from these documents. Here's something of Anne's. Anne says, quote, "The construction of personal life within modern culture has been accompanied by a conception of emotion as central to what it means to have a private life. In joining public to sentiments, however, we," and this is an author she's working with, "aim to challenge the idea that feelings, emotions, or affects," a nice scholarly term for emotions, "that these things properly and only belong to the domain of private life and to the intimacies of family, love, and friendship. The essays that are gathered here rather call attention to the range of ways in which feelings are central to public life, from the deployment of affect to produce national patriotism, to the rallying of audiences on behalf of social forms of oppression and violence, to passionate calls for activism." I also want to read to you from this manifesto. This is an activist artist group that's been around for about 3 or 4 years right now. One of the things they most recently did is, and I'm not sure about how effective this would be as a kind of demonstration, certainly wouldn't be, I think, that effective for Missoula, but they recently had a kind of sit-in based on depression after the election and the post-election days, and they had everybody go to downtown Chicago in their bathrobes and bring their meds, etc., and talk about how depressed we are to be living in an unjust modern America. Okay, so I'm going to read to you from this manifesto, which I think is pretty darn interesting. "We are a field tank as opposed to a think tank, but this does not mean that we do not think. We are governed by outrage that the desires and demands for a less bad life and a better good life continue to go unrecognized. We desire and demand to think beyond what's deemed possible. We want to interfere with the reproduction of economic, racial, and sexual privileges, to practice a commitment to an impractical sense of justice. We could adopt the pose of outraged common sense or of rational thought in an irrational world. Instead, we aim for an emotional epistemology. We propose a visceral intelligence to enable alliances with others against the rationalized wrongs of contemporary life in the U.S. and globally. Field Tank Chicago seeks to understand the economic and the nervous system of contemporary life, to feel the risk of unlearning the taken for granted, and the risk of reclaiming optimism. And that, I think, is something that we all could, spend some time thinking about. How is it that we are going to regain our optimism and solace ourselves, as well as present our various arguments to a public that seems to be numb, to say the least. We're interested in the potential for bad feelings like hopelessness, apathy, anxiety, fear, numbness, despair, and ambivalence to constitute and be constituted as forms of resistance. While we are all too aware of how the state and the media mobilize and manipulate emotions to produce a loyal citizenry and prosecute the, quote, war on terrorism, we are also critical of the ways in which the left and social movements relegate emotions to the so-called private or individual sphere. In opposing the facile splitting of thinking and feeling, we are for a pedagogy of complex feelings, for a surrealist and imaginative politics that embraces ambivalence, the ridiculous, and the raw. So what I did today in sort of thinking about this opportunity that Casey and Shiv have set up for us, and the sort of collective work we'll be doing later, is what's out there that works on a politics of emotion that we could think about deploying here in Missoula. And I've got a number of different things here from an activist group called Think Again. And I thought this was going to be much smaller, so I only have this one small thing. And there's this great postcard that sort of is like what David did. And there's a picture of an extremely scared baby here. Think Again did this postcard up and then passed it out. And it says, the baby is saying, heterosexuals use mind control to recruit their children. How do they scare people straight? Threaten rejection from family and society, justify hate, spread myths about perverts and molesters, etc. And that group then, used this rather angry postcard to do some work out in the public. Here's another one from a group in Boston that they put out on World AIDS Day. What they did is they kind of, you mentioned culture jammers, they did some culture jamming. They got stickers printed up, and you can't see this, but it's Boston Herald, and there's some football thing, and some other Patriot Act article, and then they pasted their sticker over this. The AIDS crisis is not over, and then there are a number of statistics here, and they got people to go out in the morning and to put those on various newspapers. There's another one here that I also think is really, really an effective kind of intervention into culture. Again, it's a postcard. And these are things I think we could do very easily. And there's a baseball bat on the front, and it says, "What if a straight man got bashed every time queers felt threatened by heterosexuals?" And then there are statistics on the back of the postcard that say 80% of hate crimes are committed by straight white men under the age of 23. So in our breakout groups, I mean, that's just what I'd like us, or what I would like to think about, and I'm hoping other people would like to think about, is the relationship between emotion and action, and how we can bring those things together fruitfully in ways that might shock and startle some of our fellow citizens.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. Thanks to Casey Charles and Shiv Ganesh for organizing this, the Outfield Alliance, and it's great to have something like this, a debrief after the election, after what we've all gone through and seen what has happened around the country, especially with queer issues. So I'm going to kind of talk about what happened this election and maybe what we can do to try to curb the negative that we've been feeling and have seen around the country. So first of all, we lost in 11 states. Now there are constitutional amendments around the country that ban gay marriage on different levels. Some of them actually ban civil unions as well as gay marriage, and some of them even go as far as banning domestic partner registries that give just the most basic family protections to unmarried couples. Some of them to not only same-sex couples, but to also straight couples who just need some basic family protection for whatever reason. Now, in Oregon, I think was the closest that we saw, and we were almost victorious in Oregon. Now, that we were defeated 57% to 43% in Oregon, and we spent about $2.8 million on the campaign there. By far the biggest gay and lesbian or LGBTI campaign that's ever been launched in any state. Well, we lost there. We actually made some inroads, and so there are some positives to this election that we just went through. And I think the positives are that we actually got a voice out there. We spoke about what we need as individuals, and we also identified supportive people, not only gay and lesbian people who volunteered on these campaigns or straight allies. We also identified straight people who are sitting at home, not active in the gay community, but who are willing to vote against these divisive issues because they care about their community, because they realize what we're looking for are basic family protections, and they're able to look within themselves and see that if they didn't have these protections, they wouldn't even be able to live a happy and healthy, fulfilling lives with their family. So in Oregon, thousands of people who were able to vote against this, and they still have this list today. So in Oregon, while we lost, we're able to, in the future, defeat some of these measures, or at least look at that list and use it as a tool to be able to fight things in the legislature. Now, in Montana, we did similar things. With CI 96, we actually identified voters at the polls to try to create a list of supportive voters. We identified about 3,000, so it's a lot smaller than the hundreds of thousands identified in Oregon. But with this, I think we're able to say to legislators, to people who are in positions of power, say, well, wait a minute. We actually do have people in this state that need basic rights, and you represent some of those people, and you represent some of their families. So I think it's easy for legislators, especially in Montana, to say, well, I don't know anyone who's gay. Why does it bother me? Or why should it concern me, rather? And I think that we need to take this, these lists and find these people in Montana and really create a network throughout the state to build power. Because right now, I think you all agree that we feel pretty powerless. And I think that we can turn it around and actually use this list and create the power. Because, the more people on our side, obviously, the better we are, or better placed we are, because, one vote, one person, right? And again, it doesn't seem like that's the case after this election, but it is indeed true. For example, I worked in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, on a domestic partner registry. It's a suburb right outside of Cleveland. And we were able to identify 7,500 people for this local ballot measure. And it's a city of about 60,000 people, so about the size of Missoula. And what we did is we actually went door to door talking to people one-on-one, face-to-face about the issues that we face as gay and lesbian people. And in doing this, I think we put a face to gay and lesbian issues. Whereas it's easy to say, well, I know Will and Jack on Will and Grace, and I might, have seen other gay people in sitcoms. I don't really know who you all are. And so I think when you go door to door, or you talk to people at the polls, which is what we did in Montana, you're able to say, listen, I'm gay, or, I support, gay and lesbian rights, and this is why. And so I think that going out there and actually talking to people, and I think the best time to do that is, either on election days, primary days, or going door to door and explaining what we're trying to do. So I think that maybe in Missoula, one city, we could approach Missoula, go in and actually start a campaign to go door to door. There are grants for this. The National Gay and Lesbian Task Force gives $50,000 grants to areas that want to pursue something like this. So if we were to do that, and we were to identify people on an issue, say basically, non-discrimination based on sexual orientation in the city of Missoula, we would go out and talk to people. Now I put a graph up here, or a little visual aid to show you how we actually have to target people, right? Because outside of this box, there are millions of people who aren't registered or don't even live in Missoula or Missoula County, right? So we want to hone in on the people who are. So we have 60,000 people, or more than 60,000 people who actually live in Missoula, right? But we still get smaller because there are only 39,000 registered voters. And then in 2003, only 10,688 people voted, right? So if we even go smaller and say if we wanted to try to pass a progressive ballot measure that would give non-discrimination to gay and lesbian city employees, for example, we would need 5,344 people plus one to be victorious. And so we'd start by just going out there, talking to our neighbors, and putting a face to what gay and lesbians are, right? And in doing that, we identify people, but we have more power once we're done, whether we win or lose. And I'm not saying, a ballot measure at this time is appropriate. Maybe it's too fast right now. But I think if we start in Missoula, which is, arguably our base, fundraise and start a campaign around that, I think we could take it to other cities, to maybe smaller places, to really identify people in hotly contested legislative districts, and to really have a voice and a seat at the table when we go to the legislature. For example, in Lake County, we see that the election is actually a tie right now, according to the recount. And if we had identified people there and said, but look, we had 150 people who actually voted for you, Representative Windham. We want you to sponsor this bill, or to really champion this bill in your committee, because you owe it to these 150 people that voted for you. And we just have that much power, and I think that we can build on that power, whether it's in Lake County or smaller places in Missoula, and really come up with committees in each community to do this and to work on identifying neighbors. It sounds like a lot of work, and of course it's going door to door. But you'd be surprised to know, some of you, that this is how John Kerry and the Democratic Party actually operate. They go door to door, they identify voters on a one-on-one basis in a lot of ways, and they find their votes one by one. And so I think, in a smaller community, it'd be a lot easier to do that. So we've actually gained a little bit. In Kentucky, also, They raised $500,000 for the gay campaign there and identified 50,000 people. In Kentucky, that's a tall order. And actually, it's about 250% more than any gay organization has ever raised in the state. So I think the time is now, and I think momentum is on our side in a lot of ways because of what's been going on. Now, one other thing I just want to talk about is quick. I probably have gone over my time, and I seem to be long-winded a lot, but I apologize for that. The word gay, for example. I think a lot of campaigns approach their issues in the closet, and I don't think we want to do that. I think we want to be clear that when we're protecting our Constitution, we're protecting it from people amending it to ban gay marriage. And we want to be clear that we are gay and lesbian and that we want to stop that from happening. I think when you're in the closet, I think people, when you say, hey, don't amend the Constitution, it's a sacred document, and leave it at that and don't go further into what they're doing, which is banning gay marriage, I think people get turned off and they're worried that you're trying to do something underhanded. Our opposition is happy to use the word gay, and they're happy to use that as a buzzword to scare the population. So I think we need to take that word back and be able to be out of the closet and open about it. And I think I want to commend Carl Olson and the steering committee of CI 96 for really doing that and really bringing to the forefront families. Because if we're clear with what we're doing and saying, look, what we want is hospital visitation. We want the right to inherit from our spouses. We want the right of health insurance. I think it's easier for people to be able to relate to that. So I think it's better to be open. And one commercial they actually used in Oregon was one where a gentleman was just standing there and he said, I don't know about gay marriage. I don't necessarily support it, but I don't think that we should take away freedoms from people in our Constitution either. And I think it was just very clear and upfront, and I think that's how we need to be with this. But I have so much more, and that's just a piece of what I want to talk about, or what I think we can do in Montana, but I think we can really grow a network and really, do some good in Montana. And it'll be hard and it'll be long, but I think really finding those supporters, finding our straight allies, finding the voters who will side with us, and using that power that we can gain to change Montana for the better. So thanks so much for coming again.
Wow, it's quite a turnout. I too will thank you all for coming this evening. It seems like a timely gathering, and it's actually hard for me to believe that the election was only 5 weeks ago. It seems longer than that to me. The degree to which we have all grieved, cried, clapped for certain of the election outcomes, felt numb, felt depressed, held each other, lost our feeling of solid ground, and then regained some footing is an incredible tribute to our resilience. Because there's no question that we, the gay and lesbian community and our allies, got slapped hard this last election. And I can still feel the sting. Things had been looking good earlier in the year, I thought. In my naivete, I had hopes that we were really moving towards a nation of increased tolerance, and a nation where someday, anyways, gays and lesbians could expect full equality. It's sort of my belief. I rest in kind of an optimistic place. I'm only now focusing on the harsh reality that things do not look good at all. And I try to remember that half of the United States did not cast votes in favor of this administration's positions. And that's what I focus on when I start to feel disenfranchised or less safe because of our current political situation. I want to speak to 3 ideas this evening. Broadening our concept of activism, the idea that change begins with creating common ground, and the need to pull together with others for true social change. First, let me say that no one is going to hand us our civil rights on a platter just because we ask for or because we deserve them. Unfortunately, that's never the way civil rights works in America or anywhere else. I think the real force behind the advancement of gay rights has been true progressive thought, sometimes radical progressive thought, and all of the hard work that's been required to move that thought forward. I also want to acknowledge that activism is much bigger than the visible political work that we often associate with that term. Much of the day-to-day living of out gay and lesbian individuals and couples in smaller cities and towns is a vital form of activism and backs up all of the more visible work of the larger gay rights movement. This has been my experience, my recent experience in Montana as a lesbian parent. When my daughter, partner, and I go to the mall to play on the train or to the children's museum, we interact with other parents and families as a lesbian family. And my guess is that most of the people we interact with don't know very many lesbians or gay people, and certainly not many lesbian or gay families. Last Sunday night, we had dinner with an old client of mine and a handful of work associates. These folks live outside of Missoula, have very different political ideas than myself, and there we were with our lesbian family, normalizing that family structure for people who live in a very different community of thought. I think the more we as gays and lesbians find ourselves coming out just by living our lives at events outside the gay community and outside the heterosexual community that already embraces and supports us, the more we become familiar and less threatening to people who are reacting in fear and resistance to our requests for only usual and customary treatment. So much of the action and reaction towards gay and lesbians today is based on fear and a really tight grasp on the past, a desire to return to what some think of as traditional family values. I'm originally from the Midwest, and we Midwesterners claim that we are the heart of family values. That part of the country, as well as others, cited moral values, which apparently includes opposition to gay marriage, as their top issue in this last election. Ironically, the joke in our family is that I'm stuck in those Midwest traditional family values, and I'm in turn forcing them on my partner and unknowingly passing them on to our daughter. But again, much of the response towards gays and lesbians today is fear-based. Just by living our lives openly, we are pushing the boundaries of social and family structure, and people don't not like it. Just by living our lives, we are demanding that people view their world differently, and as a result, live differently. We're also asking people to step outside of their fear and to live from a place of inclusion for ourselves and in addition for all people. What's happening is that I think this is terrifying for most people, and their response is to hold tight to what is familiar and lash out to what is increasing their discomfort, and we're the people who are increasing their discomfort. But I think meeting resistance with resistance has its place. But also meeting resistance with resistance and lashing out with backlash doesn't always work. It doesn't allow space and room for people to really change in their own time. When I think about asking others to move from a place of fear, I realize that I too need to step out of my own internal fears around my homosexuality. They come into play every day. After the election, I realized that much of my family of origin, many of whom were very excited with the results of the election, do not understand the fallout for me as a lesbian or me as a lesbian parent. I'm always surprised that even my most supportive heterosexual friends don't understand the legal limitations that we have regarding partners and family. One of my responses to the election is the realization that I really want to come out in a different way to my family and heterosexual friends, a way that makes more clear the true picture of our lives from legal, social, and political perspectives. Now, I've tiptoed around that piece because I haven't wanted to rock the boat on my home front. I've avoided sharing the levels to which I truly feel discriminated against because I've gotten pretty good support from my family overall. They've supported my marriage, they've supported my choice to raise a family, and they're clueless about how the anti-gay sentiment of the current administration will probably come down to affect how we live our lives. So the next step for me is to push my boundaries of comfort, to be more honest in my relationships about my experience in the world, and to ask for bigger support from those who already support me, and also from those that don't. For me, it's time to reach another level of opening for myself in asking for support. But this is a two-way street. This level of communication, I know, may also need for me to allow the time and space to listen to other people. They may have experiences, stories, and ideas to share with me in return. And the point I want to make here is that I think this is how we get to a place of common ground, and that this exchange is what allows people to change their hearts, and it's this kind of exchange that allows a transformation of thought and idea. The bottom line for me is, as a parent, I want full legal benefits to protect and offer stability to my family. I also want full equality for myself, for my own humanity, and I want my daughter to live in a world where people are treated equally. And so to accomplish that, I think you all know that we, at this point, need all the help we can muster. We need to create a bigger network of support with anyone that we can find, with our families, our neighbors, our work associates, religious groups, people of color. We need to continue bringing together all sorts of people and all sorts of groups with the intention of pursuing not only social justice for ourselves as gay and lesbians, but I think for all people. I don't think it happens on a separate agenda by agenda basis. As gays and lesbians, we've had our own agenda for social change, and I think it's time that we stay with that, but also expand that, along with our intention and support for a broader agenda that really does include equal rights for all. I don't think they're separate things. So my final thought is that the next 4 years will be very difficult to witness and participate in. My hope, however, is that this is the dinosaur's last breath, and that the phoenix truly will rise beyond our expectations for a more just world. We're part of a bigger movement for change that really is building. And my suggestion for all of us is to find a way that fits for each of us. It's not the same, but a way that fits for each of us to get on board. So thank you for listening.
Thank you all for coming. I just counted 75 people in this room, which is about 50 people more than I had anticipated would attend. I'm Shiv Ganesh. I teach and work at the University of Montana. Can you folks hear me back there? Can you hear me now? Yeah? Okay, good. Oh, I'm not allowed to move? Okay, fine. The last time I spoke in this room, Sarah Hayden will remember, was 5 years ago when I came here to interview, and there were 30 people in the room, and I was doing a teaching demonstration, and they were all seated at the back row, so I had to yell a lot. It's nice to see people sitting up front. When Casey, Charles, and I were planning this, and this is Casey's baby, and he just kind of sucked me into it. And when we started talking about how we might conduct something like this, we thought that it would be a really good idea to try and do something that was explicitly participative. That is to say, we didn't really want to have a forum where we had a bunch of people talk a lot about how unhappy they were. Right? I mean, I think that a lot of us have sort of expressed that both publicly and privately. What we wanted to do, and I came in late, so I don't know if Casey's told you all this. If he has, then you can shut me up. But what we wanted to do was to have a couple of speakers set the tone, and just going by what I've heard from Katie and Nancy and Chris, I think they've done just that. And after we did that, what I thought would be a good idea was for us to try and start thinking in terms of specific institutional context for LGBT issues. That is to say, what problems do LGBT communities face in different social arenas, and what can we do about them? right? And how do we, what issues are sort of we as a group passionate about, and what do we care about, and what is it that we can do about that? So in the interest of time, I mean, ideally, if we had all night, what we could do is sort of keep putting up issues on the board until we fall asleep. But in the interest of time, what we thought might be a good idea was to create a couple of we've called them focus groups here in this handout, I can see, but I think a better term than might discussion groups. So here's what I think might be a good thing for us to do right now, and I'll talk about this in a bit more detail. If we could form about sort of 6 or 7 groups going according to each of the categories that we have here. I'll talk a little about the categories as well. If we could sort of focus upon LGBT issues in each of these 6 areas for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then sort of present them to the group at large after we had done talking, then I think that we'll begin to see as a group the range of things that we can do, right? And that's a note on which I think we hope to leave all of us with this evening. But before I sort of give you specifics on what it is that on the logistics of this exercise, let me actually talk a little bit about the various groups that we came up with. Now, these aren't hard and fast categories. Right? For example, if you take the first one, legal and political action, I can see that Casey's called them action. I was thinking of them in terms of context. So if you look at the first one, legal/political action, that is something it's a pretty massive category, right? It's something that you could easily divide up into sort of legal issues on one hand and political issues on the other. As in, what are the issues that we need to work on as far as law is concerned versus what are the issues that we need to work on as far as issues in Helena and issues in Montana politics in general are concerned. Educational action, likewise, is also a rather large category, and because it encompasses both university as well as high school issues. Then you have spiritual action, media action, cultural action, economic action. Now, again, as I was saying a little while ago, these are not exhaustive categories. If you think that there's something that you're especially interested in, something that you're especially passionate about, some issues that you think need to be a part of our agenda, then feel free to sort of create your own group, or not sort of join one of these 6 if you think it doesn't fit, but talk to us and we'll try and do something about that. And of course, I mean, all of us have very different concerns, I think, as far as LGBT issues are concerned. I mean, so hence, spiritual action, for example. I mean, that is, when we put that together, I think we're thinking of sort of intervention in terms of religion, and I mean. Someone like me, I mean, I'm an atheist, right? I mean, so when I see the word spirit, I think of alcohol, not of religion. But I'm sure there are plenty of us who are, pretty passionate about, religious beliefs and what that means to us as LGBT folks. Media action, likewise, thinking in terms specifically, Casey, I think, of media representation, doing something about the way in which the media tends to cover LGBT issues, both in the news as well as in entertainment. Economic action is again sort of a really big category, right? Because you can think of it in terms of how can LGBT folks work to be sort of effective consumer groups. Right? And you can think of economic action in terms of class issues, right? As in, how does class affect LGBT folks differently? Right? So cultural action is, I think Casey was thinking about that in terms of performing arts and can you elaborate that?
Well, this kind of came out with some of the stuff that Katie and I were talking about a while back, like demonstration projects and bizarre things that you might want to do or build, or different kinds of creative actions that people might want to take on or off campus. It could be, anything from And a lot of this, also we were thinking about building coalitions. Could be like Lesbian and Gays for Peace or something like that. You could somehow mix those symbols in a, some part of the Oval or downtown outside the, so I mean, thinking creatively about, also about art and narrative and things like that. Different ways to get your message out in creative and interesting ways. So we have a lot of people in here that are either artists or writers, or like how can you harness that energy around changing, taking action?
Okay. So what I think might be a good way to proceed is if I talk to you in a little more detail about how we might conduct the group discussions, and then if you have any questions or suggestions or clarifications, then we'll go ahead and make those, and then we'll divide ourselves up into groups. How's that? Okay, all right. So in terms of format, as I said a little while ago, perhaps we could spend about 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes talking about the specific issues that we have here. Now you'll see that there are three questions that we put here per group. The first is, what's your feeling about the election? 2, what now? 3, what specific action can you take? And the first two questions may seem sort of especially general, and I think they're actually designed to be. And of course, I mean, I look at question 1 and say, what's your feeling about the election? And I think that, to me, that's resoundingly obvious. To me, my own feeling is kind of resoundingly obvious, but that it may not be so for everyone. Right? Different people may have had different reactions to the election. Likewise, different people may be thinking differently about the what now question. Right? Some of us may be thinking in terms of, oh well, it's 4 more years of hell, and some of us may be like thinking in terms of Hinckley, right? So I think there's sort of a range of things, and some of us might be thinking that this is a good thing. So I think that there's sort of a range of responses to be gotten in that dimension as well. And finally, the third question is sort of specific to your context and specific to the action that I think you want to take. And it's here that, if you have anything that you feel the community should do, or that you in particular could do as far as this particular context is concerned, as far as this particular category of action is concerned, that I think might be, that I think is sort of pretty important, and we'd like to hear from you on that front. So once you're done discussing, if one person from each group could come up here and present what the group has done or come up with in 5 minutes or less, and then we can sort of go over 6 groups and then see where we're at. So in terms of sequence, what I guess would happen is that we've got groups 1, 2...
Well, actually, first of all, are there any questions so far about?
Yeah. None?
Okay.
Have I been really clear?
Well, there 1 is down there, 2 is where the cameraman is, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then, depending on how many people go to the legal and political ones, that could be split off into 2. So probably some lawyers here, and people that are interested in legal stuff, and people that are more interested in kind of political action, in which case there could be a kind of splinter there. But let's see where people hang out and see how it goes in terms of that. Now, are there any other people don't feel like they want to do something that's not within that group? They can also kind of hang or come up here and tell us what's on your mind or whatever.
Okay. So a good way to proceed might be for you to look at the number of the issue that you're interested in, find the group, or if you're not especially concerned about which group you join, then just find a bunch of people who look like they might want to talk to you, and then the first thing I think each group should do is probably elect someone to take minutes and be spokesperson, and introduce yourselves, have a good 20-minute conversation, and then we'll convene again. How's that?
Okay. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the middle, and then 6 down here. Now we'll go around and see who ends up in what place.
This whole thing is mic'd. This whole thing is mic'd. Is it? Yeah.
We're going to get back, we'll get your feedback from one person there, and then what I was really hoping, and we'll send the minutes, including the addresses of everybody to you, based on the mailing list. But really what I was hoping is that then you guys could get together, like, create a kind of working group around religion issues, because that's really a huge issue, is getting the religious message straight about how how unspiritual the televangelistas or whatever they are or whatever. So anyway, so let's go around and start with what should we start with? Number 1?
Sure, number 1.
Okay, hey, number 1. Who's going to, what is number 1?
I'm taking it's like legal political action. Yes.
Legal and political action. We have Tom Facey here, our congressman. We also have Carl from Pride in this group, and a bunch of other people who are really good. Who's going to report back? Carl? Carl.
Can you hear me now? Okay. One of the things that our group did not talk about so much was a very localized political or legal action, although we talked about Snetzinger. But I think there's certainly more room for activity there. But we did talk about what's happening on the state level, which includes this local group. There are 4 bills that have sponsors for the upcoming legislature, which starts in January. Representative Christine Kaufman is sponsoring a civil unions bill, which is mostly based on Vermont civil unions, and also it looks a little bit like New Zealand's civil unions law, which just passed. Representative Ellingson, who is from Missoula, is sponsoring the Next of Kin Dignity Act, which establishes a domestic partnership registry and gives a handful of protections that do not tinker with the tax code or health insurance, but leave a foundation upon which to build in additional protections over time. And it's based on the California model, which has been quite successful. Those are both in response to CI 96 and the whole marriage brouhaha. There are also 2 bills, one to amend the Malicious Intimidation and Harassment Act, which is known as hate crimes, to address anti-gay bias crimes, and the other one is to amend the Human Rights Act, which is to include sexual orientation among the categories of prohibited discrimination in employment, education, public accommodations, etc. So there's some great activity that we're going to see in the Capitol. Naturally, representatives need to hear from their constituents about these bills. Missoula representatives need to hear from their constituents. And Missoulians who have connections to other parts of the state need to persuade their connections to let their representatives know. So if you're from Ekalaka, please phone home and ask your family to call their representatives. So it's going to be an exciting session. We will also see, for the first time, or at least the first time in many, many years, a lobby day for equality. I wrote the specifics of that up here. It is Martin Luther King Day, so many people will have it off. Legislators will not have that day off, so they'll be at work and be ready to meet us. We're hoping to get a ton of people to brave the weather, to brave the sucky roads, and to forget that Helena has bad restaurants and just come anyway and let their voices be heard and put their representatives to work. We haven't seen that in Montana. We've seen it in other states. A lobby day, a day to lobby on behalf of equality and gay and lesbian rights is quite standard in many other states, including some that are close to us. And we need to see that happen here in Montana. We also did talk, probably could have been another group, but there was legal issues, and the Snetzinger case, we're hoping to hear a decision any day now. It's my understanding that it has to be by January, sometime in January. They can't just let a case go on forever. Snetzinger is a health insurance equity case that was generated out of the university here with employees, and we hope to hear that decision, and of course we hope that it'll go the way that we want. We had a major victory in the election, and many victories in Montana. Montana is not really a red state, and one of those victories was the Supreme Court Justice Nelson, who won over Youngkin, who would have been terrifying. So we don't need to talk about Youngkin anymore. And hopefully this Snetzinger will go well. And most of the legal folks that have weighed in there's a kind of consensus that says that we should wait for Snetzinger before launching any other kind of litigation. And marriage litigation looks really iffy in Montana because our amendment is so clear and concise legally, it's really hard to argue with on legal grounds. And so I just want to encourage people, even though our group was focused on political/legal, I want to encourage people not to compartmentalize their lives into this is my legal life and this is my personal life and my private life and my social life, but to look at it as an avocation and just blend it in with everything that you do. I personally found that rewarding, and I know others have too, and I think that's our synopsis.
I'm Ani, and I was with the Education Committee, and we were talking about education at all levels, from elementary, secondary, college, and community-wide. So in terms of with little ones in elementary school, figuring out, making sure that we're teaching diversity and critical thinking skills from a very young age. Getting into middle school and high school, working towards comprehensive sex education. There was some talk about how damaging abstinence-only sex ed is, and making sure that that comprehensive sex ed includes education around sexual identity and sexual orientation. Making sure that there's GSAs in all the schools, gay-straight alliances, and getting curriculum developed to address LGBTI issues, as well as integrating that into other coursework and curriculum in the high school level, as well as on college. And in all levels of education, we talked about education that builds relationships, that allows people to make personal connections, like panels that the Lambda Alliance has done on campus. Also, I'm with the organization, the National Coalition Building Institute, that does prejudice reduction workshops, that also is very focused on building relationships. And so that that kind of education seems more effective. And on an informal level, that happens person to person, like several of the speakers talked about earlier, in coming out and talking to our neighbors, friends. And we talked about the importance of also doing education for community members and reaching them at community town meetings or through church groups or other groups, workplace groups, and really focusing on engaging allies to be more proactive in supporting LGBTI equality and not just reactive, but to engage allies to go out and talk to their families, their friends, their neighbors. So figuring out how to engage people in that way. We talked about a social marketing campaign. The YWCA of Missoula is launching a racial justice social marketing campaign through billboards, TV, and radio ads. Something similar could be created to really focus on homophobia and LGBTI equality. And we also talked about having just visibility in terms of having booths at fairs and community events and Hemp Fest, things like that, just more places to be visible and have a presence and give information. And I wanted to share just a brief story in the work that I do. I recently, a Hmong woman that we work with shared a story of her 10-year-old brother convincing their mom to not vote to support the ban on gay marriage. And it happened over the course of one conversation, and in that conversation, he reminded his mom of how she wasn't allowed to speak Hmong at work, and that the ban on gay marriage was like the same thing, just a different set of rules for a different set of people. And in that one conversation, that shifted her thinking. And so, to me, it feels really quite hopeful that through education and through conversations and building relationships, we really can shift people's thinking. So that's a synopsis of what we can.
Our group spoke directly to the spiritual action end of it, and because we are a spiritually diverse group, Al and I are going to kind of present this together because it is, we come from Christian background, Jewish background, Islamic backgrounds, variety backgrounds. So to begin with the question of what are we feeling wound up leading to 2 or 3 other questions that emerged. But in beginning with that, what are we feeling, right away brought up the feelings of the idea that the right has co-opted God in some way, and so the response was to take back God through dialogue, through bridge building in a variety of places. And it led to the question of how did this happen, and that the left seemed to just allow it to happen. And we talked about why is it that was so easily to happen. And part of what came out of that was, an idea of, in an effort to be sensitive to diversity, we can kind of seek a least common denominator. At the same time, the right seems to have a real ability to sacrifice all to be single-focused, and liberal progressives are often focused in a variety of different areas, so that can get diluted a little bit. Another spin out of it came that how the right has seemed to co-opt the idea of civil rights being tied to religion, which a lot of that emerged out of that through the 60s and 70s, and that they saw how well that worked, and they jumped right on that methodology to push things through. And they need not be the only folks to focus on that methodology. In response, we mentioned that we need to be more forthright with attacking evangelical monopolies on religion, to be less apologetic about our own faith belief systems, to get rid of the fear to speak, from our own perspective, to not fear the attempts to delegitimize our own realities, but at the same time being and maintaining a sensitivity to the diversity of faith backgrounds that we all represent. So that led to the second main question, was how is it that we can be proud and vocal about our belief without offending or stepping toes of each other? And again, we came back to get into the theological debates, at the same time maintaining those sensitivities, to define those scriptural texts, to not allow another side or another position to define it and that definition remain. We have the ability to define through study and all the means we have of the texts of our respective religious backgrounds. The thing that'll tie this together would be focusing on our universal truths, regardless of the denomination, the world faith. There are common truths, that thread through of love and justice, and we need to find those things and speak in those languages rather than sect-specific, languages and terminologies. That led to the question of, well, where do we challenge that? And the one arena that we spoke about the most was in our church communities, and how to do that, to push the boundaries within the church communities, and folks spoke of personal experiences of successes in doing that. That there are networkings. One network within the Christian faith is gaychristian.net, where people are building these abilities to gain support in taking on our respective church communities. And then we briefly touched on that, those same things we can do within our families, within our workplaces, in the other communities where we find ourselves. In the end, we wound up with, well, when is the right time to do that? And we spoke of, folks spoke of, when you have to be ready and able, emotionally, psychologically, whatever, to take on each battle one at a time. And, and how can we get more ready, more able, whatever, to take that next step, and that is in helping each other through forums, panels, and a variety of things like this. So Al wanted to speak to a few things.
Thanks, John. Oh, John's covered most of the topic pretty well, certainly. The reason, I had two reasons, I guess, basically for volunteering to also speak. Partly because I happen to be, because I am by heritage and happen to be by heritage, and I am by choice currently a believing and practicing Jew, and I think it's important that people know that there are not only gay, lesbian, LGBT Jews, but that there are some Jews and some rabbis, for that matter, also, who challenge the religious right, whether it be Jewish or Christian or Muslim or what have you. We do, as I believe Jonathan, you do have to take religion and morality from the religious right. I don't want to just repeat what John has already said. And one of the things that was brought out that too, which I think needs emphasis, is that we need to be more assertive. Perhaps need to challenge the fundamentalist Christian or Muslim or ultra-Orthodox interpretation or understanding of the Bible, whether it be the Hebrew Scriptures coming out of the Old Testament or the New Testament. Or the Islamic scriptures, in the case of Muslims, whatever. No doubt, we Jews, as well as Christians and Muslims and Native Americans, who are people of faith, need to, who belong to a religious congregation, need to be out to our congregations. And especially the boards of our congregations, something that I haven't yet done, I must admit, but I know I need to do it. Also, we need to be more articulate and vocal. I can't, maybe I just spaced it out or don't remember. But we also need to emphasize that the importance of being articulate and vocal, that the Marriage Discrimination Amendment has nothing whatsoever to do with the sanctity of marriage, and explain why. Also, no doubt it's important to, as someone, at least one person in our group remarked, we need to underscore the spiritual and ethical imperative of love and justice. As another member of our group remarked, we all live in our own cultural bubbles, but apparently evangelical Christians, and I would add ultra-Orthodox Jews and fundamentalist Muslims, etc., even more so, tend to live in their own cultural bubbles. As one gentleman who clergy, one of our distinguished and gay-friendly, GLBT-friendly, and very openly so, but like himself, gentlemen, clergy persons in our group pointed out, conservative people of faith are more willing to sacrifice more of their time, money, energy, etc., than are liberal or progressive people of faith. We people of faith need to be more willing, genuinely willing, to make the same amount of sacrifice, the same strength of commitment in this connection. And a couple final things specifically about those progressive rabbis and progressive movements in Judaism. The more progressive movements in Judaism, namely the Reconstructionist and Reform movements, have already begun ordaining openly gay and lesbian rabbis. Many, a good number, anyhow, I don't know just how many or what percentage of liberal and certainly progressive rabbis have already begun performing same-gender commitment ceremonies or marriages, though, except I guess in the state of Massachusetts, gay or lesbian marriages are not legal, except in West Vermont, even commitment ceremonies have no legal standing. But nonetheless, they can still have, of course, a spiritual significance. I guess that's about it. Thank you for letting me share.
I'm Lee, and our group was talking more about the media action possibilities. A lot of the things that we talked about surrounded the fact that here in Montana we really haven't heard a lot from real Montanans. It's been kept on the theoretical side, and it's largely been framed by the opposition. We haven't been allowed to hear Montanans tell their own stories, and they have a lot of stories to tell. And in the meantime, because it's been kept so theoretical, a lot of you may have seen in your voter guide the thing that was graciously offered by the League of Women Voters that talked about how if CI 96 went through, the churches would be forced to perform ceremonies, whether or not they liked it or not. In other words, we think that a more effective presence, allowing the impacts of what this amendment does to real Montanans is probably an effective way to get a message across. So, let's see. Another thing, we really didn't see any discussion from the major media outlets, paper, TV, cable, whatever, at all on the issues as it relates to Montana on CI 96. It was always very theoretical, always discussion of very quick pro and con things. So, in other words, a media campaign or a change in media should be to search out forums and to search out a framework and support for real Montanans to tell their stories.
Hi, I'm David. I was with the cultural group that's over here. And initially we talked about reactions, and of course ranging from shock, depression, and some of us said predictable, maybe, not particularly surprised. And at the end, perhaps we feel energized and empowered in a very positive way to move forward in specific methods. And thinking of that, topics that we touched upon, first of all, importantly, I think people mentioned interrogating the we, looking across this room, who we are and who we are that's not here. And we need to be thinking about including broadly. How art of all types, since we were talking about culture, we tended to move towards art talk quickly, which was art of all types could have an important impact, which is what we were hearing also from Lee. And some things we heard from people in the group: poetry, poetry readings, personal writing and expression, wearable art, which we have Bridget with her t-shirt on.
Bridget is wearing our Who Would Jesus Hate model.
There was some question about art projects and where funding would come from for those on a local level or a national level. And it mentioned that the AIDS Council just provided support for 15 pieces of art that was built around AIDS queer issues that are out right now in the galleries, a couple of galleries. Katie had discussed truth and commission groups, or public sort of talk about what happens to people, or has happened to people in Montana, their experiences here, getting that public and heard repeatedly by people. I mentioned proximity, which is sort of that just slow and insidious outness, being next to people every day, all day, and they can't escape, neither can you. But that has this sort of wonderful corrosive effect upon people, right, over time. And I don't know who, I talked to someone recently who said they're converting one neighbor at a time, which I really find very true in my school system. A couple of other small things. Power of image, right? And we were talking to Jocelyn about the images that you probably remember from the Dump Bush rally. Some of the things we most remembered, had to do with music and those big images of that they'd created out of paper mache, I think, and whatnot. So, and that was pretty much what we talked about. I think one thing that also stood out is the very real impact that perhaps people don't realize falls upon our shoulders, what Bush has done, to be specific, not only to us, but people across, across the U.S. of all kinds, and that it hurts us, individually. Yeah. And the fallout from that is that we're having a meeting on Saturday at 10 o'clock, 10 a.m. Saturday morning, 320 South 2nd West, if you're interested. That's the culture group, talking about what we could do as specific plans now, moving on.
Well, are there questions or comments from anybody about what we've done and where we can go from here?
I do have one comment, and that's what I was just, when Dave started going down it. That is on this lobby day, Schweitzer and McCullough and all of these people came out at the 11th hour and endorsed that. Yeah. And Morrison. And they should be confronted with that on that day. I mean, that was uncalled for. It wasn't even efficacious. It was just an insult. Yeah. So I just, it was sort of like negative icing on the cake. And I think on that day that there should be a real, serving of notice to the governor about that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think Pride has done some of that with at least McCullough and Morrison. So I think it needs to be done over and over again, for sure. I mean, I think that if Democrats, I don't know if Tom Facey is still here, or is he taken out? Democrats need to make up their mind if they're going to stand by their principles or as I said earlier, be expedient. And that's a real issue for us right now. What else? Carl?
Lee, I don't know if your group had read the voter's guide that you referred to. It did have that section that you talked about where the anti-gay folks said, churches would be forced to do this, blah, blah, blah. The section that followed that, the pro-gay section, was a young kid's story out of Polson, Joseph Kiefsky. It used a real person to deliver those values to that audience that read that voter's guide. So I think what you were saying is absolutely critical. There needs to be more faces, actual faces put to the issues. But in that one case, and in some others, that was done. And I want to make sure that there's some credit given for that.
Joe?
Quick question for the Legal Political Action Group. Do you know if there is anyone in Montana who's currently addressing the concern that the marriage amendment blatantly discriminates against certain intersex people based on their sex, their physical sex? They are neither, not easily fit into the dichotomy of male or female. People with Turner syndrome, Klinefelters. Is anyone addressing that there's a fairly, good-sized minority that is being straight out barred from marriage by this amendment?
To my knowledge, no one is. I think it's certainly worth looking into.
Okay. And also, is there any feedback from the transsexual, transgender community on how they feel about this, constitutional prescription of bodies and identities, and how do they fit into that?
Well, yeah, because gender is not such a clear-cut category for making these kinds of decisions about who can get rights and who can't. So I've read some stuff about, how the intersex community represents the ambiguity of that standard. And from a legal perspective, that could become a way of arguing against it. Even though it's a fairly small minority, it still shows that the standard itself is inexact. It could be a way to make a legal challenge.
I think to bounce off of what the media group was saying, that would need to be told in not a theoretical way, but with real stories. And that would mean folks who would be willing to risk their status. I have a friend who's intersex who is married, and her marriage is solid, even with this amendment. But if she were to come out and be open about that, it might risk that. And so to really see it put to the test, it might take some folks who are willing to do that. It can certainly be talked about in a theoretical way, but then you'll go so far.
Any other kinds of comments or questions about what we... I think that one of the things that I'm kind of nervous about is, coming to this, having a lot of feelings about the election. And I know because I am in a group with Andy, and we talked about this heaviness that kind of was over us and how we were walking around Missoula thinking half these people voted against, half these people don't accept gay people. And I'm walking down the Kim Williams Trail, and half these people couldn't see through that amendment as a kind of a hateful act. And it's really scary, I think, or it was scary for that time period to be gay, to be walking around, even though, as Chris said, the actual statistics are different. It was very kind of scary to be out and to be walking around, even in Missoula, for that time period. And on the other hand, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about tonight. But on the other hand, people were saying, well, we need to have some objective, like the last group who isn't here anymore, actually came up with the idea of these kind of intolerance stickers that they'll go around and see if businesses will be willing to put up, that they wouldn't, they have one at the coffee place at the UC. So they were thinking, well, we'll make some stickers and go around and ask businesses if they'll put them up in their businesses. So that was one of the things they did. So there's kind of a disjunction. I don't know, Katie, it's funny because Katie was talking about this disjunction between, okay, we're going to make stickers and t-shirts, and, you know, the whole feeling that one has about, you know, what went on. You know, I don't know, there's a little kind of disconnect there, but I think we talked a little bit about both. But, you know, it's funny to think like maybe this group will get people able to, you know, become more positive with their anger and depression. I don't know.
Or ask other people to face the fact that anger and fear and depression is out there.
Yeah, exactly. So I know I felt that, and I still kind of feel some of it. But it's really good to have a great turnout and to know that there are all these people that you don't see that often that are really supportive, you know, gay and straight alike. So I think that's been one really good thing to come out of tonight. Shiv, do you have anything?
Yeah, well, actually, I was thinking in terms of this large number of email addresses that I seem to have collected, and what I was thinking of doing was to try and produce some kind of synopsis / minutes of what we've been discussing as a group for the last half hour or so, and send it out to you folks just so that it A, serves as a reminder that there are a range of things that we can do about, you know, our current political situation, and B, hopefully sort of forward it to other interested people who couldn't be here and try and, you know, sort of use that as a platform for action, or at least sort of interpret it in your way and see what you can do and go ahead and do that. I guess I do have a question for you though, and that is, you know, this event was sort of, you know, put together by Casey and myself under the auspices of the Outfield Alliance. And I guess, you know, my next question for you folks is, you know, well, what now, just in terms of event organizing? Right, I mean, is this it? Do we need to do any more? Should there be a part 2 or not? Yeah.
I think the essential point is that the cost of Rubicon, the election is awful, but we're still getting together because we care. This issue isn't going to go away, and we can't forget the fact that there's more potential now for progress than there has been at any point in the past. The election, in some ways, as awful as it was, isn't surprising because this is still a fairly moderately to heavily conservative nation. We just can't let the right wing hijack the issues of morality and the issues of God anymore. And just the fact that we're getting together shows that we're willing to stay in the fight. So, as bad as things were, this is a room of good people invested in good ideas with the moral high road, and whatever does come of it, we just can't let ourselves fall back into the immense design of things. As long as we're still here, you know, I don't want to be a Pollyanna about it, but maybe just for a minute, you know, don't go back to bed and wake up in the morning and forget about this, because that's the best way to sort of let God die an evil, ugly, evangelical, literal death. And I just don't buy it.
Thank you for saying that. Anyone else?
I think that if we're going to see any of these ideas come to fruition, we're going to have to organize again. Otherwise, I don't foresee too much happening other than just a collection of really good ideas.
I think we should call us out. Sorry, Lori, go ahead.
No, I just think we all have to commit, basically, to that action, and then plan the next event when we get together, so we can kind of narrow down to specific actions that we want to take and then come back.
I think because Outfield Alliance has a specific institutional history that, you know, we might think of affiliating ourselves with that group and call ourselves Outfield 2 or something like that, and then use that to organize a membership list and committees.
And I think there should be an event of some kind that comes out of this. I mean, I think that that's what makes people happy. It's what energizes people. And that there could be sort of action centers, an event that has action centers to go out from the event, you know?
Charles, too, the Diversity Advisory Council could partner with you in some form or another.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we didn't get to was like building coalitions, because that's one of the things we wanted. How can the gay community join the multicultural community, the CAHA, the peace movement, the women's movement, and all this other stuff to create bigger coalitions? And that's an issue we didn't really target as much as we should. Yeah.
I think it's really good what you said, that we need to stay positive, and that, you know, it's a civil rights issue. We've got to have 2 steps back when we go 3 forward. It's part of the yin and yang. We've made great strides, and we're so close. I think a group effort, you know, pursuing on this would be excellent, and I would love to be involved in it. And we need to reach out to other communities. A lot of times, groups that are disenfranchised promote their own agenda or their own concerns, but yet we're part of a bigger community, and just as we feel disenfranchised, and we want to show the people that we're for positive community involvement and families and all that stuff, how do we maybe reach out and help out abused women or single mothers that are having a hard time of it? There's so much more out there to make it you know, a community, a true community. So let's look a little bigger than just our group. You know, that's our focus, but hey, let's go wash cars or do a bake sale or babies. I don't know. Let's do it for the community, because that's what we want to be a part of. That's what we are a part of. So by getting out there, like people have said, hey, you know, I'm human. Don't step on me. I'm part of this community.
Yeah. Well, what we'll try to do then is we'll try to organize another meeting in the spring, or like February or something. But in the meantime, if your group, if your group wants to get together, what we're really hoping is that these cells would produce, or these groups would produce your own kind of action group. I think Lori's right. We're going to have to come back to see if that happened or not. And if it didn't, then whoever's left is going to have to do some stuff. Otherwise, it's not going to take off. But if someone takes off on their own, that's great too. So I appreciate that comment. We'll make the effort to follow through. Yeah, Outfield 2, the sequel. Okay. Well, thanks a lot for coming. And